All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Uriah Kaiser. I'm the publisher of Potomac Local News. Joining me on the podcast is Senator Danica Roem, who is gracious enough to come on and talk about really he's just a unique guy. I mean, in local politics, there was nobody like him. Bob Weir, who passed on Sunday, and that was July 20th, 2025. And this is the next day. And we thought it was important to come on and talk about Bob Weir, talk about his contribution to the not only to our community in Prince William County, but to his town of Haymarket, where he lived and served on the town council before he was elected to the Board of County Supervisors. Um, Danica, you before you got into the illustrious world of statewide politics, you served, you were a reporter
Yep.
for the Prince William Times for years. You covered Western Prince William County. You covered Bob Weir. You got to know him more intimately than a lot of people, and so I really do appreciate you coming on and wanting to talk about him this
Yeah, of
today.
course, right. Well, thanks for the invitation. And you're right. I feel like a lot of this today is I'm not going to have my senator hat so much on. A lot of it's going to be reporter hat. Some of it will be senator hat for sure. But it's also you and I have lived here forever, and we saw the Board of County Supervisors at its worst. I would argue in the '07, '08 time frame. We saw the Haymarket Town Council devolve into utter dysfunction. I mean, to the point where I wrote an editorial questioning the need for its charter to continue existing at one point, like where because like things were so bad. Um, and at the same time, it was impossible to be a reporter covering Western Prince William, covering the McCourt building, and not have an almost weekly, if not monthly, mention of Bob Weir somewhere along the line because he was, for all of his ornery, cantankerous, curmudgeonless, everything he loved to project because he loved that image for himself, he cared. He cared so deeply about the town's finances, about government transparency, about being an absolute utter stickler for procedure, especially Robert's Rules of Order one day, Jefferson's Manual another day, or just you name it. And here's what was I mean, like everything's unique about Bob Weir. That's just who he is. But he was, for someone, he was a Republican, in name. He was as nonpartisan with his, we'll just say, politely criticisms
Mhm.
of everyone, could not have even thought to have cared what your party ID was. He did not, that didn't matter to him.
Yeah.
What mattered to him was pretty much, even though he didn't go to VMI, he went to UVA, was the VMI code, which was like, a cadet shall not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do.
Yeah.
That's who he was to the end of his life.
So we'll bring people up to speed. We lost Bob yesterday on the 20th. He died really suddenly
Yeah.
of colon cancer. It's my understanding it was a very aggressive form of colon cancer,
It's
and it and
metastatic colon cancer. So it started there and then attacked his abdomen and it went from there. He had been not looking great for a little bit, but the end accelerated very quickly.
and he was at the most recent Board of County Supervisors meeting on July 8th, though he participated remotely.
Yeah.
He was there. He was talking. And to your point about who Bob was, he talked to anybody, and he didn't care who was listening. He would tell you what he thought. Being a reporter, you know that there are some people who will call you back right away. There are some people who won't talk to you until they know who you've talked to specifically for a story so they can frame their responses accordingly. But Bob never cared. Bob would always, no matter what time of day it was, tell you exactly what he thought on any given issue. And as of late, and kind of what got him elected to the Board of County Supervisors during the special election, was data centers. And you guys have been
Yeah.
in the trenches on you in Richmond with data center legislation, trying to put up guardrails against this industry that is it has really just come to the forefront of development, all not just Northern Virginia but across Virginia, and residents who many of them Democrats in Prince William County, which leans heavily Democratic, uh, elected Bob a Republican because they saw in him someone who was listening to them when it comes to their concerns about data centers.
Yeah, and one of the things that you deal with in county government and local government that's a little bit different than the state and federal is that party ID at the local level, it yeah, it can matter to a point depending on who the characters are. Like if you're gonna really have, like in the Sean Connaughton days, for example, when he was chair and it was 6-2. the it wasn't six Republicans versus two Democrats, and that was the way things were going to break down every vote. There was the conservative bloc, the ultra conservative bloc. There was John Stirp and Corey Stewart. They were on one end. Then you had Sean, Maureen, Wally, and Marty. They had their block, and then you had Hilda Bargan, John Jenkins. And so this four would likely stick together for the most part here or there, but in order to get to five, they were going to either have to on this end or they were going to have to get someone from this end. And more times than not, it would actually be the two Democrats who were going to come around to them more so than the two, like, ultra conservatives would, right? Or at least that's the way kind of things were working in like from that '03 to '06 era. And then, Sean gets tapped for U.S. Maritime Administration. Corey takes over the board. And the balance of power and things begin to change as Corey himself began to change. And so when that happened, you could see, yeah, there could be very, very aggressive partisanship. You wouldn't be partisan toward a John Jenkins. This is not how you would talk to him. But I tell you that because for the regular voter, I think when you look just at the data, when you look at my votes, for example, or like my margins, like what I won by and stuff, when you look at, Josh Thomas, for example, him and me winning at the top of the ticket where we have the letter D next to our name on the ballot, and you go, yeah, that reflects about right where the district is and everything. It's a split ticket, hardcore down ballot as soon as you get past that state level because people are really voting on the individual significantly for local government. That happens frequently. Now, I can also tell you there are some things where it's like, yeah, right, maybe a lot of voters who come out, they might be influenced by a Senate or House race. They might not know all the down ballot stuff, and so maybe they're voting RRD based on that. But like it's pretty incredible the crossover vote that you'll end up seeing in Western Prince William in particular. It's people talking in the modern day. They're like, oh, split tickets dead the day of that's just not true. It's not true
Mhm.
by the numbers. And
Mhm.
Bob knew that extremely well. And so, yeah, he ran as a Republican. He was a libertarian to his
Mhm.
hardcore. And the
Yeah,
way
no, I couldn't agree with you more.
yeah,
I mean, he was a policy wonk. Bob knew exactly where every policy was located on every
he
page.
was looking to build a coalition. He wanted
Yeah.
to figure out how do I get to five votes, and he didn't care where it came from. He didn't care if it came from R's or D's. It was how do I get to the votes? And if he was on town council, then it would be I'm going to use my force of personality and the fact that I'm smarter than you to get to four votes.
To that point, you wrote, which really is a wonderful, always the writer you wrote this wonderful memoir to just remembrance of him, and you posted it to Facebook this morning, and and it's funny. I'm going to read a portion of it. Where I got so you knew Bob longer than I did. I got to know him generally at the McCourt building when he would
Yeah.
long before he was ever
Oh
on
yeah.
the supervisor board, and he was a town council member. He would always come and speak at the board members, and when he was done, I would go out and talk to him
Speak
when he
at the board members is the best way to phrase that. That's correct.
that's right. He would speak at them, and then he'd go outside and cool off and have a cigarette. I would go outside with him and talk to him while he was having a cigarette,
I did the
and
same thing, only in
and and
town
and
hall.
that's where I got to know him. But you wrote here, it wasn't the dais in the court building where the public really got to know Supervisor Bob in his role of serving Gainesville in the 2.5 years, or even the one at Haymarket Town Hall in his roles as longtime councilman and planning commission liaison. That's not to say he didn't spend more than 2 decades of his life filtering through both buildings. And he knew that, well, his reputation preceded him in each. After all, on one occasion, he opened a citizens' time speech with something along the lines of, Bob Weir, a local curmudgeon. And he gave his name and his street in the town of Haymarket. And on another, he closed the citizens' time with the speech with a simple, Merry Christmas, by the way, and 3 minutes of gloves off, gauntlet drop, pistols donned at Fury. That you captured it. I mean, I really think that that was Bob Weir. And when he got fired up over an issue, you knew about it. They knew about it. They saw him coming from a mile away. And there, to my mind, covering Prince William County for so long, I don't. There are the people who come and speak, right, at Citizens Time. For those who are not familiar, that's the three. Everybody gets 3 minutes to come and speak during public comment time, but very few did it like Bob Weir.
Well, here's why. Okay, the very few do it like Popper. Anyone as an elected official or reporter who's been around and for a lot of meetings, you have your regulars who show up, and some of them can be very, very well versed. Other of them can be very ideological. Um, and the things that you hear at that point can be sometimes really cringy and then sometimes really enlightening too. And then you've got folks who are there because an issue has come up. There's something. Bob used citizens' time before he was on the McCourt Building dais to make the public aware of this. I've already talked to these people. They already know the gist of what I'm going to be getting at here. You need to know that if they don't vote right, if they don't vote the way I'm telling you that they need to on this, that this is what the consequences are going to be, especially the consequences of the budget. And keep in mind, he was on John Sturp's budget writing committee. He was on Pete Kalen's budget writing committee before he did it himself. He was, and if you were a Democrat, you picked his brain all the time. Yeah, I mean, just because that was just like, who else would you go to? You have some members of the board. I'm not going to get into all the name and stuff, not today anyway. Just who can be much more, partisan, career advancing, wanting to go X, Y, or Z. Boards past and present, that's, certainly no exclusions, along the way here. Yes, Bob ran for for higher office. Yes, he ran a very short-lived primary campaign against Corey Stewart for chair in the run-up to the 2011 campaign. And yes, the Merry Christmas comment was directed directly at Corey. That was there's a lot of that. He also spent many nights drinking with Corey too, to be absolutely clear. Bob could flame you on one day and then, have a beer with you the next. It was absolutely Bob Weir. But so what was really important to him for Citizens Time, especially, was he wanted the transparency that came with it and to make the most of those 3 minutes to say, here's what you aren't seeing as the public. I see all of this and I'm going to put it all out there. And as someone who would have hated being called a politician, he understood and reveled in the theatrics of it so much that he could capture your attention and captivate the room, And if you were going to go up against him, he loved that if you had your facts together, number one. Number two, you were not going to lie. And number three, you were not going to be a wilting flower. If you did those three things, he would look at you as a peer in that regard. And if he considered you a peer, then you were an intellectual challenge to him. And that was like, oh, that's what he really, 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 really liked. But if you didn't do your homework, God forbid if you lied, oh my God. And if you didn't have it together when you were there, he would sniff it out and pick it apart instantly and be very vocal about it. And then here's the worst of it though. If he thought you were doing it for malicious intent or personal advancement, and I'm gonna just put a pin in that for a second, then he considered you the worst. And he wanted everyone in the world to know whether or not that was, true. It was just, how he thought about you. But that personal advancement part, when he took over as Gainesville District Supervisor, he didn't splash his name on stuff. He made a point of that. When you go to the Haymarket Day Parade, the Gainesville District Supervisor had a tent, and it didn't have Republican Party colors on it, certainly not Democratic Party colors on it or anything. It was black and white and just said Gainesville District. The tote bags, the hats, the whatever else that came from the office, it was Gainesville District. This is for the district. And his staff not only, acted accordingly, they shared that with him. And just to say one thing, because I know she's not saying a lot of public stuff right now. His chief of staff, Rebecca Bear, who I knew from town council, I knew from when she was on planning commission and in Haymarket Town Council. She has been the patron saint of Haymarket over the last, really the last month, but just no one knows unless you are Bob's immediate family, just about how much she has done,
Hmm.
and just and to get through all of his health things and everything, and just that she just she didn't talk about, she didn't say he's like my brother. She said she just would say he's my brother. And
Hmm.
I promise you, Bob looked at her exactly the same way.
We are now looking now at a time of transition for the
Yeah.
board, and we do not know yet when services for Bob Weir will be held. Of course,
Look, just there's not going to be a public funeral or anything from the best of my knowledge. It's going to just be, like we're all just gonna get together at Giuseppe's at some point and just share stories, because
yeah.
that's Bob. Okay, like that's Bob wasn't a, all right, let's go have a big formal thing or whatever. He was, have a Michelob Ultra or Scotch,
Mhm.
get around in a venue that he actually liked with people he actually liked, and just tell stories for hours.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
what that looked
and
like.
that would be in stark contrast from what we saw in 2019, the passing of John Jenkins, who was the longest serving
Yeah.
supervisor on the Board of County Supervisors from 1982 and up until the time of his death. And so during that time, Prince William County held a very large funeral for him at the Hilton Chapel in Woodbridge, and so that's the only other time during my tenure I've covered the death of a sitting county supervisor, and that was a big deal. And that's interesting that you say you don't expect to see that this go around for Bob.
No, different people. You know what's really funny is I was at Jerry Connolly's funeral, and James Walkinshaw gets up, and James had been, who's by the way from Prince William County, he's from Gainesville, who's our local guy, running for Congress and stuff. He gets up and he begins his the first speech of the whole thing, right? And he says something along the lines of, paraphrasing him, like some people are, prefer low key, humble, quiet events and stuff. Jerry was not that person. He wanted his big, elaborate, bring the whole world together, like, just Irish charm stuff. Bob was Scottish. He was Bob had absolutely no interest in pageantry. Bob's version of pageantry would very much involve bar stools.
Yeah.
So that's much more his style.
Yeah, as we kind of wrap up, what's the takeaway from a character like Bob Weir when it comes to someone who is looking to go in and to serve their community or their state and going into politics, or maybe for people who are already there, and maybe for people who like us cover the community, right? There are so many things that Bob did and said, and from his research to his presentation, I mean, what are some of the key takeaways that people should, whether it be politics or
Okay.
community service all around, take away from Bob?
Okay. Few things. Number one, don't be Bob. Don't be Bob. Don't try to be Bob. Don't even think you're Bob. Don't go down that road. Only Bob Weir is Bob Weir. That's yes, in local politics you get a lot of characters. That's you're talking this larger than life for such a short guy anyway. He would say he had short guy rage. Um, just 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 number one, let Bob Weir be Bob Weir for all eternity. Number two, learn from what he did in respect to reading everything, being persistent and consistent with following up and getting answers that he wanted, snuffing out contradictions, and making sure that the numbers worked, that order was being followed. Number three on this, nope. Um, one of Bob's, I'll just be blunt about it because that's how Bob would have been. Um, Bob's mouth got him in a lot of trouble, a lot of times. Look, where where to begin? I ain't done with you yet, so I'm just gonna start telling some Bob stories here, just because. Okay, if you weren't covering him or being around town council 15 years ago, and so you didn't get to see him storm off the dais, having resigned because he was really upset about whatever procedural crap had happened. And then the town council had to reject his resignation because God knows they couldn't have survived without him. And he knew that too. And so then he'd come back on. And so when you saw Bob earlier this year walk off the dais because him and Chair Jefferson got into it, for everyone else, that might have been like, "Oh my God, look at Bob Weir! Just what a statement!" And I'm like, "There he goes again." Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just so yeah, let Bob be Bob. Bob had his shortcomings. Okay, he had things that he said where he rubbed people the wrong way. He got censured by the town council. I'm not even gonna go into that whole thing, although it's the funniest thing I've ever covered in politics, without any question about it. No, like all the things that led to it, without a doubt. It's just like peak Bob, not family friendly, not safe for work. Just peak Bob. Bob, he did so much with this. And here's what's critical with this. Yes, he had this personality where he could rub everyone wrong way, right way, depending on whatever the wind was blowing that day. He knew what he was talking about with public policy, with why you wanted elected officials to fulfill the oath that they take of public service and constituent service, and not to play games with taxpayer dollars, not to hope that things were going to, make all the numbers work, but to prove it ahead of time on the spreadsheet. This is what we have to do. One of Bob's proudest accomplishments was on town council that people would have forgotten, even though Bob apparently said before he died he'd be forgotten in 3 to 4 years. Bob, I'm just gonna say bleep you about that. That was you're not gonna be forgotten anytime soon. He led the charge for the town to issue refund checks to the residents when they had a surplus. That's not done very often.
Mm-mm.
And like in the General Assembly, we've done it. We've done that a bit, but in local government, you don't get a lot of refund checks coming in from because there's always something that needs to be spent on. That was one of his proudest things he ever did, and he wouldn't even say proud. He would just been like, "Well, it's the people's money; it's supposed to go back to them."
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. It should be because it should be. That was his
yeah,
way of thinking.
yeah, and so if you need more revenue, the question I would ask to any local governing official first is, did you go over each line by line in the budget, and are you really at a place where, okay, unless we get more in, we're going to face catastrophe? If Because if you're not there, then really ask yourself, what are our needs versus our wants?
Hmm.
That's Bob Weir's style of governing.
Hmm.
Next part with that is he welcomes people from all walks of life into his personal world and into his work world. How the hell does a transgender metalhead vegan living on, now in Manassas Park, and it's the time the county part of Manassas, who's a Democrat, who's a news reporter, who got a text message from Bob Weir at one point that started with, "Hey, expletive," because he didn't like something that I wrote because he thought it made the town look bad. And my response to him was probably something along the lines of, "I can't make you look bad when you're already doing it wrong." Something along those lines, whatever. Like you had to snap back at him. You couldn't let him like see a flinch. Um, just, just that's just how it is. But you never saw him go into culture wars on the dais. You never saw him discriminate against the very people that he was elected to serve from the dais and stuff. Now his sense of humor that got him in trouble here and there because it was very, we'll just say uncouth, without any question. Yes, he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way as he did it, but the big caveat on that was you also knew that you had to accept all of his flaws, all of his quirks, all of his personality traits, because my God, how the hell would Prince William County's government and the town of Haymarket's government function without him? And Uriah, as I'm thinking into next year, you're going to be thinking about this as a publisher when you're covering the McCourt building because you knew he had the best quotes, but it wasn't just that. You knew he was well researched and that if he was going to give you something, he had everything to back it up.
Yeah, without a
Like
doubt.
you didn't have to do 4 extra hours of digging because he put it in your hands. When I
Yeah.
out Amazon is the owner of the data center in Haymarket, when Dominion wouldn't tell us, it's because Bob Weir's the one who went into the planning office, got the documents, put it in my hands. I took them, put them in. I know the person's name, but we'll just say a Dominion official's hands. And I
Hmm.
said, "Read this out loud." And he
Hmm.
says, "I will not reveal the name of our corporate client." I was just like, "It's public record from the planning office. Read it." You know? And
Hmm.
then I published it on the front page. And then I needed some quote in there, not just to say, "Hey, everyone, it's Amazon." But I was like, like, I can't be the one who does that. I need that quote. Bob Weir, it's Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Bob was, a tough nut to crack, but he was also a joy to work with, a joy to cover, because as you said, Bob did his homework, and you knew that if Bob called you about something, whether it be, and it's funny, I guess when you got those expletive text messages, you really were somebody. So that that was great to get those too. But when Bob gave you something, it was a big deal because he had put so much time and effort into it, knowing his facts and knowing that it was solid before he gave it out. You just didn't get, "Hey, go check this out. There may be something over here you want to look into." No, Bob knew. And to your point about when he had spoke at the dais, he'd already talked to all the people.
Yep.
He'd already told them what he thought via phone call or email. He was just, again, as you said, alerting the public to those of us who didn't know what he knew, and he
Yep.
was so vocal about that.
And
Um,
by the way, for other people and stuff, you're gonna see, tributes here and there and all, well, however they come out, well earned, well deserved, whatever. You want to know if you actually want to memorialize Bob Weir, defeat the Prince William Digital Gateway.
mhm.
If you genuinely, shared his value set, defeat the Digital Gateway. That was the fact that he's not going to be around for Judge Irving's ruling on it is like to me it's an injustice
Yeah,
because
but and for those
he
who may not
cared
know,
so much
listening
about
in, that
that
is the largest data center complex that will be,
in
should
the
it go
world.
forward, at the
Yeah,
Manassas National Battlefield Park there, on the
yeah.
other side of Manassas on I-66. Um, Thank you for
Oh
coming
yeah, of
on and
course.
talking about Bob and sharing some of your insights, deep insights, working with him over the years. And we'll post the information if there's anything at Giuseppe's, if there's anything at all, we will
I'll
be
let you know.
sharing that information, and maybe I'll see you there.
Oh, and they're also they're gonna at Long Park they're gonna plant a one tree for John Liver, the late, he's a late planning commissioner, by the way, and then they're gonna plant a crabapple tree for Bob. Son of Winchester and very much to the core of who he was. They'll do that for him as well.
Danica Roem, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ray. It's good to talk to you.